Put dates on them?
Mhm.
Okay. I think that's something Janine's going to have to show me how to do.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
This vet killing the three ladies, for some reason, that really irritates me to the fact that I'm having these.
What are you talking
Yesterday, a vet
about?
shot.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay.
In California.
Yeah. I feel like I'm in a dark space. Like I feel the darkness of him not feeling loved, of those lady, him not seeing the love in those ladies, and I'm just not sure what I'm supposed to do with those feelings. Like it's strange. I mean, I've been sad about some things, but it's like I'm looking at us as we really just don't care about people, and somehow that doesn't seem to be a truth we should be, or I should be espousing.
So what are you asking?
What do I
What we
do
do
with
about
those dark feelings?
Nothing really. If you didn't have those feelings, you wouldn't be remorseful for humanity. Somebody has to plead humanity's case to the universe.
Why can't it be everybody?
Because everybody's not here.
Everybody's not what?
Here. That's why I can't be everybody. Everyone was with Jesus. Everyone was not with Muhammad. Everyone was not with Buddha.
Now that you put it that way. Okay.
So, I do think that things will go much smoother, and we will see a greater sense of balance when we get to the place where we recognize it's not necessary for us to wonder why us and why not someone else. I've often said when when I was being shown what's in the scriptures, I used to say, why me? And then one night, I was meditating, and this voice said, why not you? If it were not you, you'd be wishing it was you.
You're wishing that it was you?
I mean, who is it that does the scriptures or does anything who does not wish that they could be at the top of the game, for lack of a better term, or excellent at what they do? Then when you're excellent at what you do, then you say, well, why me? Why do you ask that question? Because now when you get good at what you do, all these other things come at you. You cannot lead without having a target on your back. And the target in this case is the target in this case are your emotions. That's your target. And those are the things that pierce your heart. The events that take place in this country. The other part of that is we have looked deeply at females and how things are with them. But I want to glance at something else in relationship to that. In order for the male to release the hold that it has on humanity, is going to have to be because males who understand the issue does. We've been talking about how females have been relegated to a position of servitude.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at it in relationship to our having been enslaved, we didn't end slavery. The ones who instituted it ended.
Okay.
The perpetuators ended. And if we are looking at it from that perspective, then those who perpetuate the subservient nature of the male are the ones who must change that. Am I making sense? We have to do
Say that part again, Sage.
The ones who are treating females as their servants must stop doing that. That's the only way it's going to happen.
And you said we have to perpetuate that?
No, I said the ones who are perpetuating it are the ones who have to end it.
Okay.
You can't stop me from hating you.
No.
I have to do it on my own, right?
Yeah.
That's the same principle, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, how does it change? When the attitudes of masculinity began to change. I think it is worthy to speak to the nature of males, the nature of males and the changes that we've begun to see. And the changes that we've begun to see are males beginning to recognize who they are and how adverse they have been to the female. I was listening to something on TV, and this guy said that he was referencing Black Panther, and he called it esoteric BS. Hollywood has all these esoteric movies that mean nothing. And I wondered how many people felt that way. But then I thought, you don't expect that Caucasian male to readily accept what that movie was speaking to. So for him to reference it as being esoteric, yes, should be expected, you know.
But the other thing is that it doesn't matter what he says. We know what we put in the macro.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
say what you will.
And maybe he's saying it because he's really fighting what he knows to be the truth underneath.
Well, usually that's the case. You know, usually that's the case. There was a statement, I don't know whether this was last week, that was made to me. And I was in a discussion with this person, and he says to me that he was questioning a lot of stuff that we do because he's they're a great faith. And he said to me, he said, now I don't question whether or not we are effective in changing things. He said, because the first time that I heard death spoken to as transition was here at Great Faith. And he said, after we started calling it transition as opposed to death, now everywhere I go is transition and not death. And I know that it emanated from Great Faith. I say all that to say, if you ever question the validity of what we put in the macro, remember that. That be a source of remembrance to you, and a source that says to you that this is real, because it is. You know, sometimes you ask yourself, am I imagining this? Is this coincidental? Are we making stuff up? That kind of thing. And you need some kind of guidepost at times to show you where you are, as opposed to where you were.
I was at a funeral yesterday, and that stuck with me. That he said, you know, when she was transitioning.
Yeah. And it's a reality. That's one of those. And I must admit, I had not thought about it, you know, in terms that he presented it. But I am very much aware of the things that we have put in the macro that we have seen spread rapidly. Maybe he said that in order to spark something so we can readily embrace what we put in the macro. And by embracing it, become more adamant about it, about how we do things, and careful about how we speak things. It is my belief that we are the holders.
Mhm.
We're the ones who are slowing things down. By the we, I'm talking about those who are on this journey. The sooner we embrace the reality of not just who we are, but our purpose, the sooner we are able to move forward.
I just think about how we move from physical to the spiritual because of the terms that we're using now, such as we talk about the source, we talk about transitioning. It's all about vibration, how we're vibrating, and it's amazing how you feel a draft.
Feel chilly. Great.
And I'm just saying though, it's amazing how what we're saying now, we're more on that spiritual journey now.
On that vibration wavelength.
That
In a
wavelength.
sense.
But we talk about validity. We talk about transitioning, fine tuning, the tuning.
Like the tuning fork.
Yeah, yeah.
The whole idea of what we do must be embraced by us. If we don't, it doesn't happen. Because sometimes I believe that we hear it, but we don't put it into practice.
Yeah.
There was, since the first of the year, since December actually, we have been talking about when should we come together as teachers, right? And I'm like, I don't know. There's a struggle with that. However, when I spoke with Sheldon last week, because his schedule was, most complicated, and he said, well, 17th or 24th, and I said, okay, we'll do it the 24th. And what happened is, for some reason, I usually send out group texts to the teachers. I sent them individually. And when the responses came, they came back to that. I mean, very quick. That this is, the date was great, we were good with everyone. And immediately I understood that it's time for us to come together. And I started going through some things that I felt we needed to speak to. And then it was like a huge feeling of an erasing, saying that's not your place. It's not my place to make those choices. Those choices are made when we come together. And we do whatever we're guided to do when we meet. This to me says that we are closer to seeing exceptional change than we've ever been. I have a belief. No, it's not a belief. I see something. Suppose that we represent humanity, represent the tree of knowledge and good and evil. When you say vibration, the whole root for heaven, Shemani, is because the root of his light, and it speaks to vibration and rhythm.
Okay.
Rhythm, good morning. rhythm with the universe has nothing to do with your movement. It has everything to do with your attitude. And your attitude determines your movement. If everything emanated from the African womb, then that means that seed and egg was there. Elohim was male, female, right? Out of that womb came a man with the seed and a female with the egg. Suppose that the African represents as a manifestation of the tree of the good or the rightness of the tree of knowledge of good. And the other extreme is the Caucasian, this manifestation of the unrightness. And everything else in between is simply thoughts and discussions about how we bring this thing together to a place of balance. Suppose that this tree of knowledge of good and evil is ours to deal with, ours meaning Athens or humanity. And we have absolutely no right to the tree of life. The tree of, we have no right to it, meaning that we cannot approach it at will to be nourished. It is what nourishes us based upon our attitude, vibration. If we're in rhythm with it. Suppose that the man in the gap, or the atom in the gap, is the manifestation of Adam that has a desire to bridge both worlds through the light that vibrates between the worlds. And because of this desire, this atom is constantly nourished by the tree of life. And the tree of life is simply enlightenment. It is perfect enlightenment, complete wisdom, complete understanding of the wisdom of everything that is. And we are responsible, we're charged with bringing this wisdom and understanding to humanity so that this balance can take place. And when it does, this tree of knowledge of good and evil actually becomes the tree of life for this world. And that's what Revelation is alluding to when it talks about the tree in the middle of New Jerusalem with leaves of hills. Does that make sense? Suppose that's the truth. Suppose that this is our, not just responsibility, but our obligation. It is my contention that when you understand or accept your obligation, that leads to you having your wants answered as well. Because of this. It leads to your wants being answered as well. What I mean by that is, if you deal with your obligations, then some of your wants will be taken care of. Seek ye first the kingdom of God's righteousness. That's what I mean by obligation. We are obligated to do that. And if we are in tune with the universe itself with the one who created us, if we are in tune with everything that is, then there should not or will not be a problem with bringing that balance. Now, what does this being in tune look like? Being in tune with the universe is really throwing caution to the wind. Not being concerned about any material aspect of our being, but being singularly focused on the spiritual essence of everything that is. And this is the thing that brings rightness to the tree of evil or unrightness, or to the second brother. And when the unrightness becomes right, the whole tree is right, and that in itself is life or enlightenment in a perfect sense. And perfect, I don't mean without blemish, I mean complete sense of the word. Because humanity or Adam was not created without blemish. That is very obvious when we look at the spiritual architectural plan for the creation of Adam. The architectural plan for Adam is found in the first chapter of Genesis, in the 27th verse. We're very familiar with that, but we're not familiar with it at all, because we have taken too much for granted. If you look at that verse in Genesis, what does it say? It says, it speaks to the idea of the creation, right? It says, let me read it. Where are you? It says, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God created him, male and female created he them. First of all, it says that, it tells me that this is an architecture plan, because when it says Elohim, it says Elohim, Elohim created Adam. And it says that Elohim created Adam in his image. Image means to resemble it, to be like it. Then it says that in the resemblance of Elohim was created male and female. Male and female has nothing to do with Ish or Isha at all. Male speaks to something that I really hadn't paid that much attention to. Male speaks to Zakar, and it deals with from its root, it deals with the sense of personality or a person, the attitude. It deals with remembrance and causation, and offering a memorial. And female is, what is that? Nikwama. And it doesn't deal with Isha at all. It actually speaks to the idea of being punctured or penetrated, perforated, blasphemy, to be cursed. All of these things different than what we have thought it was. So what I am beginning to see is that on this tree, or in this concept of tree, I should say maybe, are those traits that are right and unright. And the rightness of them are determined by how we approach them. So if the entity Adam was created in the image of Elohim, and Adam has these blemishes, for lack of a better term, and so does Elohim. Everything that Adam did, Elohim had the propensity to do, because it was created in his image. And when it talked about his image, it did not talk about anything physical at all. And even those words, male and female, doesn't speak to the words for male and female when we get to the place where, for this cause shall a man, Ish, leave his father and mother, or home, and cling to his woman, Isha. Those are the words used there. So the words Ish and Isha speak to what each one of those represent, maybe, or speaks to the ingrained personality traits of the male Ish and the female Isha. If that is the case, and I indeed believe that it is, then it is incumbent upon us to delve deeper into it so that we can begin to, at the very least, make every attempt to embrace the essence of what we were created to be. Because honestly, it is my contention that these traits that I just mentioned, based upon the words used for male and female, are represented or manifested in estrogen and testosterone. Both of them are in everyone. Now, if we look at it, the earth, Elohim did not instruct Adam to replenish the earth in the sense that we thought it did. The replenishing comes with determining what emotions you're going to exhibit, what thoughts you're going to follow. What are you going to bring into manifestation? Because when we look at the whole concept of be fruitful and multiply, it's all about increasing. And when it talks about replenishing the earth, it's not speaking to the ground. This whole verse, or these verses are speaking to spiritual architectural design. And the concept of replenish means that something else was here prior to, of course. But it's not talking about growing some trees when it speaks to the idea of having dominion over what? The first thing it says, fish. And the idea of fish is masculine, and it speaks to the or comes from something that talks about being anxious or being afraid, which says to me that what Elohim is saying is you must dominate your fear. You must master those things that bring fear to you. And of course, I can go on with the others. When it says that the fish of the sea is talking about something that has boundaries, something that your fear has boundaries. And the boundaries that your fear has are the ones that you give to. And courage is simply the mastery of fear. So when we look at it spiritually, the question to me becomes, what is it that this image was fearful of? What was it afraid of? If you want to understand what people are afraid of, watch them when they're presented with circumstances that they thought they had conquered. When the entity says, for this cause, I believe the fear was that it was going to be controlled, and it chose not to be. So if we look at this and see that what's being developed in these two verses especially are the equivalents of not just Adam, but also the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because both of them are mentioned there. When you talk about penetration, that could very easily be violently done, or it could be pleasantly done. So both are present there. When it talks about fear, fear can be a motivator, or fear can paralyze you. So the question, the idea of this being the manifestation of the knowledge of the tree of good and evil speaks volumes, because what it actually is doing, it's like in this room, there is no room. So Barbara and I are talking, and we said, you know what? When we construct this room, we are going to put a carpet on the floor, and we are going to paint the walls lavender, and we're going to hang fans in the ceiling. Okay, none of this is in existence.
No, it's just
None of this is in existence.
Right.
When we construct the room and we put these things in it, now they are a part of the room. So what I'm saying is that all the things that we see or the attitudes or emotions that we see in the that we see in the 27 to 28 verses are equivalent to the carpet, the walls, the fans. And what we see in the second chapter, where he was created from the dust of the ground, is the construction of the room around so that these things can be put in. Can you see what I'm trying to say here?
I think so.
That all the attitudes were there prior to the actual being coming into existence in a physical manner. Because think about it this way: when this entity was brought into being, what happened? The ones who created it said, "It is not good for this entity to be alone." Right? So why did, at that point, it did nothing to make sure it wasn't alone? What did it do? It says, and it told Adam to name all the beasts of the field. And then it came to the place where it was made aware of the human. So why did it go to the beasts of the field prior to the making or to bringing into existence this feminine aspect of making the masculine aware of that. Why did that happen? Why, what's so important about that? Because I don't believe for an instant that it was a mistake. Why did that happen? It did not say that it took the man or Ish to name the beast. It said Adam, which consisted of both. All of this being spiritual had to have natural, material, physical implications. Allegory is a story that's told that has spiritual truth. And this I see as an allegory. As a matter of fact, I see the whole scripture as allegory. The beast represents the thoughts and emotions of the man. So it is an expansion of what was listed in chapter 1, verse 27, leading into verse 28. If we can understand this conceptually, then, or if we can embrace it conceptually, then it gives us a sense of how important it is for us to make sure that the ripeness of that tree and the unripeness of that tree, quote unquote, communicate. Because when you look at their emotions and attitudes, they have unripeness and ripeness, don't they? So how is it that ripeness can bring unripeness to a place of to a place of rightness? How can this evil be made good? How is it that a ripe peach can make an unripe peach ripe?
It emits gases.
Huh?
It emits gases.
Yes.
It's true.
I know. I wanted it to marinate for a minute. It is. So that is indicative of what? You don't see the gases that it emits that bring that ripeness, do you?
No.
But it does it. So this says that there has to be an infusion of spiritual essence of what we were truly created to be into the unripeness. Are you following me? There has to be an infusion into the unripeness. So what does that infusion or that, what does it look like? It is called, one of the things it's called is forgiveness. No one can describe to you what forgiveness looks like. But they can describe to you what it feels like. The experiencing of it. So, if forgiveness comes from the right in order to bring the unrightness to a place of rightness, that's a beginning. But it takes other principles to continue this. Just because of one infusion of forgiveness, it doesn't change. What it does, it causes humanity to open its eyes and begin to see something different. Like when the 9 people were killed in Charleston and forgiveness took place, what happened? Eyes were opened. Like, how can they do this? Where does this come from? So all of a sudden, there is an opportunity for those who are unforgiving to participate in an act of forgiveness. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because now, the question that they're asking is, how can you do this so quickly? Well, when you are right, it's not, you don't have to consider it. It's just done because it's the right thing to do. And when the unforgiveness experiences this, it doesn't know how to take it. Why? Because it's not right. It does not know how to deal with it because it's not right. So what ripens it? When something happens to it and it forgives, sincerely forgives, and it experiences that forgiveness, now it is on the journey to becoming rightness.
Well, what you're talking about, I missed it.
You never listen.
But on the, like when we were talking about the tree of knowledge of good and evil, it's that center column that has to bring the balance. It's almost like a taproot in a sense. And that, when you bring balance, it's almost like well, no, it does not almost like it. That's the connection to the spiritual right there, that's the connection to the tree of life. That's the direct connection.
Yeah.
So
the actual, to me, the shooting was the symbol. And the forgiveness transcended the act.
Which shooting are you referring to?
Charleston.
Okay.
It transcended the actual act. And as a result of that, forgiveness was infused into a place of equalness.
it's like the love covers the multitude of
Of
whatever.
Yes. Yes. So this is the reason I offered the supposition about the tree of knowledge of good and evil being a manifestation of humanity. Or humanity being a manifestation of it, rather. And not a manifestation of the tree of life at all. And have no right to the tree of life at all. It has to bring into fruition the tree of life in this consciousness, in the earth consciousness. And that's the new earth that Revelation talks about.
Can we go back to what Janice was saying, how, and you were talking about the
Yes.
ripe fruit next to unripe, right? And how do we compare, how is it that we're the same way?
Okay. Let me give you some examples, okay? How is it that what what are the females doing, or what did they do and are doing to bring about or to begin to manifest a sense of we're not taking this anymore? What did they do?
Speak up.
They marched. Where did they get it from? The civil rights movement. That's the gas that brings about the rightness.
Okay.
Here's the pattern out here. This is how this change is going to take place. Now, though it is manifested through the marching, there is a spiritual message in all of that. Because when the marches were organized, and I'm speaking of the women now, the primary focus was the rights of females. But it has morphed into the rights of humanity. It's morphing into something that it never was. Why? Because when it reaches into this place of rightness, and begins to mimic what it did to show them what rightness, how to bring about rightness, it also takes that energy. And that energy transcends feminism. It's about humanity. All rightness is about bringing balance to humanity, not just a group of people
Right.
based upon gender or the illusion of race, because there's no such thing as race. But that's what it's about. The reason that there is such a fight to prohibit America from being brown is because there is an effort to hold on to the evilness that made this country what it is. Think about it this way. If it had not been for the enslaved, there would not have been plantations. There would not have been this mass construction of cities, because that's what built them. When slavery, quote unquote, ended with the emancipation, that's when a dire need began to surface. What they took for granted all of a sudden became a necessity. What's that necessity? How you go build your roads without us? Who built your bridges? Who maintained your bridges? Who maintained your roads? Who maintained your barn? Who tilled the fields? Who are the ones who produced so that you could be wealthy? It wasn't just something. As a matter of fact, if you do your research, you'll find out that the ones who controlled the slave trade were Jews. And they called me an anti-Semite for saying it, but change history then. But that's the truth. When they saw this necessity, all of a sudden, these black codes had to be written in order to make sure that the roads were maintained, to make sure that the highways were constructed, to make sure that white people had labor on their plantations. So now, what happens is, you have a Confederate flag flying that says that we want all of our stuff back. That's all they're saying. We want somebody to do all this for us because we don't want to do this. And now it's taken down by an African female. So once it's taken down by an African female, a woman of color, whether she liked it or not, was the one who made sure that it stayed down there. So when that took place, what was happening? The energy from the woman who climbed the pole was the energy of rightness. Because she did not climb that pole for black nationalism. She did not climb that pole for separation. She went up that pole based upon humanity. What brings balance to humanity? Even though those were not her words, it was about changing a system. So when you look at that, the question, that what she did, the energy she brought to it, is the gas that's passing from the right peach to the unripe peach. And from that, things began to move exponentially. Look what happened. What's the difference in Charlottesville and the Edmund Pettus Bridge? When what's his name? King and this other dude that's in the house. Lewis crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge. They were being nailed to death. When these kids, and I call them kids, the young people, marched in Charlottesville, they were predominantly Caucasian. But what happened? They were brutalized the same way, by the same system. But what changed? because of that, there was a greater emission of this gas that brings about ripeness. So now all of a sudden, there are a group of people whose ranks are beginning to expand, who believe that the problem is not just how females are treated. The problem is how people are treated. And as a result of that, you begin to come closer, not only to a place of balance, but to a place of rightness. And the Putins, the Trumps of the world, do not want the browning of America to take place, because that's going to happen around the world. That represents balance, as opposed to what racism. It's just what it is. It's balance. And it brings to the question, what does it matter the color of your skin? Why does it matter? Why are people fighting? Come get your child, please. Go to your mom, please. Why are people fighting so hard for that to take place? I mean, for that not to take place. Why are they trying to circumvent that? The reason they're trying to circumvent that is because as long as the illusion of race exists, there will always be racism. And if this thing can be stopped in its tracks, the same ones who have raped the whole world will be still in charge of raping the whole world. These things sound political, they sound economic, but they really aren't. They are spiritual. The terms that we have applied to them, political, social, that kind of, but all of this is spiritual. We were created to be one. And the illusionary concepts of separation did not come until skin was put on the male and female in that third chapter. When that was put there, then something took over. And the thing that took over is something called evolution. And people began to evolve based upon their geographical locations and also mutation of humans, of course. So all these things came into play. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
So now what I'm beginning to see is that this whole effort is greater than stopping at making sure that feminism or female feminine energy does what it's supposed to do. It's greater than that. And I do believe the reason that I'm beginning to see these things is because female energy is at a tipping point now. And that tipping point is that it is doing what it's supposed to do. There has never been in the history of the world, on the scale as broad as this, females doing what they are created to do.
One of the words you talked about in reference to the feminine was like to puncture or pierce, either violently or not. And when I read it, it didn't say necessarily to be penetrated.
Right.
It was the action of penetration.
Yes.
So I'm thinking about that in terms of the feminine willingness to set things right. And the only thing I could come up with is you know, when you puncture an argument or something, you take all the air out of something. But I feel like there's more to it. I just don't know what it is, which is my question.
Okay. I believe that it is a penetration into the system, infusing it with positive energy, or the type of energy that brings that lends itself to bringing about thoughts of balance, thoughts of balance, but opening the eye to see that race doesn't exist. Open the eye to see that there is no separation between male and female. One of the things that I've said often that I must refrain from saying, and that is about reconnecting to the Creator. We've never been disconnected. So nothing has ever been disconnected from the time it was brought into fruition. We just have brought those thoughts into being, and we have expressed an illusion of separation, but that has never been the case. So the puncturing and penetration at the point of 1:27 Genesis is dealing with spiritual penetration. It's talking about conceptually. And when it talks about the maleness of remembrance or memorial, it's to me, it's speaking about remembering how you were created and where you came from. Because at the onset, that was not an issue. The issue did not come until
So this is not the first creation story.
no,
Yeah.
not at all. No, it's not the first creation story.
The thing that strikes me about that, not only the person and the penetration, but it says to bore.
Yeah.
And when you bore, it's a targeted drilling, my words,
Uh-huh.
drilling to get to an end or a product or a goal or something, whatever the goal is. And so, to bore means that whatever terrain I have, I decide right here, right now, is where I need to. I'm doing this way.
And
this way.
And I see what you're saying. And the target is the system. The target is this system. There are aspects to the system. And the aspects to the system is communism, is socialism, is capitalism. These are aspects of the same system. Because regardless, whether it is communism in Russia or China, all of them want the same thing. All of them are in it for what they can get out of it. And all of them are in the same place, Africa. That's what they are doing. What? Extracting. So the system has to be penetrated. The system has to be changed. And go ahead. Go ahead.
I have rarely gone to movies in years, but I went to Black Panther and I went to see A Wrinkle in Time.
Oh my goodness.
Oh.
Same day?
Wow.
Interesting. She's trying to talk.
Tristan, come here.
And the point is, the Wrinkle in Time, you saw women in places of power, but they were different women, different race, different culture, and the goal was overcoming evil, which tells me that related to the good of all mankind. So that's all.
And when I said that the onset of that the reference was made to Black Panther being esoterical BS, that was brought up too, A Wrinkle in Time. I haven't seen it yet, but when they said that, I definitely intend to see it. I do not think that these movies are coincidental. Neither do I believe that they could have been written in a different time. It had to be done now.
And also a multicultural family that was involved. So I can see where some people might see it on a superficial level, but I mean, there's so much underneath. That's all
There
I see.
are I have not, out of all the commentators that I've listened to speak concerning Black Panther, the only ones who saw nothing in it or just a movie were Caucasian. These were the only ones I saw. We saw nothing in it. Now, some of the Africans saw something, but they saw the wrong stuff.
Yeah, there was definitely some people who were confused.
Yeah, they saw the one who died as being the hero and had the right idea. And that in itself is racist. So, but they
They
saw
weren't
something.
paying attention.
Huh?
They weren't paying
No,
attention.
they really weren't. But they saw something.
Yeah.
That's my point.
Yeah.
But they did not see it just as a movie. They saw something beyond that. The Wrinkle in Time is a reflection. I have not seen it, but based on what you said and what I felt when you were speaking, the Wrinkle in Time is a reflection of where we are in terms of the energy functioning as it was created to function. That's what I'm saying. Do I think that this movement is going to be hampered because of the lack of news coverage? Not at all. Not at all. Because if you look at it, they stop talking about the kids. These kids are constantly organized, but they're not talking about them. The ones in Florida, they have not stopped. But the intent is to stop them by virtue of not talking about it. Because everything they stop talking about dies. Everything. So the objective is to kill it. Why? Because of the powers that be. It is not in the best interest of Christianity for change to come in this country. And that is one of the reasons you're not hearing as much as you would normally expect to hear about the women's movement and the kids. It's not in the best interest of Christianity for change to take place. Catholicism controls the news. It is not in the it is not in the best interest of Israel for change to take place. It is not missed by me to see that Netanyahu and Donald Trump both are under investigation. That is not wasted. I know that this is definitely spiritual. Now, why do I say that? Because no one want to talk about the African slave trade at the hands of Jews, European Jews. That's where they got their wealth. Read the history of it. When Richmond, Virginia was established, there were only Jewish slaveholders who established it. No one want to talk about that. Everybody want to sweep it under the rug because if you say it, they call you anti-Semitic. You can't be anti-Semitic with people who are not Semites. And they are not Semites. Honestly, Islam as it is cannot afford for change to take place. Because the tentacles of Islam, as it is put forth, are no different than the tentacles of Christianity as it put forth. Both of them are based upon material greed.
And control.
Yes, and control. Well, yeah, because if you don't control, you don't take over it. You don't have anything. Donald Trump, and I don't know whether I said this or not, but if I did pretend I didn't, I'd be excited about it. Donald Trump did not bring about any confusion whatsoever. He is not the chaotic being that he has been accused of. He's not. All he did was expose the chaos. Because it's been chaotic beneath the surface all the time. He just exposed the chaos. And the exposure of the chaos is doing what? Spreading around the world. So, when I take all of these things and look at them, not just on the surface, but through the spiritual eye, I see a system being torn down and replaced at the same time. That's the penetration to this. The energy, positive, being infused. You cannot tear it down without replacing it. And it must be replaced as it's torn down. There is no way to reform it. There's no way to rehabilitate it. And we have been indoctrinated to believe that this is the best system in the world. It's not. It has to be replaced. Why is it that it cannot be reformed? Because it's based on greed and all the isms you can think of. I believe that Billy Graham is indicative of the death of the evangelical. I believe that. I believe that what's happening to Netanyahu is indicative of what's going to happen to Israel. I believe that. Because everyone in Israel do not believe as does Netanyahu. No one want to talk about, everyone want to talk about Israel belonging to the Jews for thousands of years. That's not true. 1948. Nobody want to talk about 1948. No one wants to talk about Muslims and Jews and Christians living next door to each other without any incident whatsoever before 1948. No one want to talk about that. No one want to talk about that it was Menachem Begin who invented the car bomb. No one want to talk about the first terrorists in the Middle East were Jews in Israel. They were the first terrorists. No one want to talk about it. No one want to talk about that. No one want to talk about the extrication of the Palestinians from their homes, literally, and Eastern European Jews taking over their homes and living in them as they belong to them. Nobody want to talk about the truth of that. No one wants to talk about the wholesale murder and attempted genocide of the Palestinians. Nobody want to talk about that. Nobody want to talk about the continued murder and attempted genocide of the Palestinians, and you need to get your job. No one. It's a distraction. One. No one want to talk about that. No one wants to deal with the issues there, and no one wants to deal with the whole concept of Israel being representative of Great Britain, France, Germany, the U.S. All European nations, all European controlled nations are the ones who are the major supporters of Israel. Why is it that you think that this government is what keeps Israel afloat by virtue of how much money it gives it every year? Everyone who receives foreign aid has to buy it, spending money with U.S. companies, except Israel. They can do it anywhere they want to. Why is it that there are no penalties paid to Israel for having a nuclear bomb? None. No one wants to talk about that. And everybody looks at this as being political. This is not political. The one who created everything that is has been waiting for an aspect of Adam to say, regardless of what it takes, I will stand in the gap. I will be the one who do whatever it takes to bring this thing to a place of balance. No one want to talk about these things that are really, really detrimental to the enhancement of humanity. No one want to talk about that. You know, when you think about it, none of the news folks want to actually use the word that Donald Trump and Netanyahu are racist. They don't want to say that, but they know it's the truth. They know it's true. No one want to talk about the whole of evangelical Christianity is based upon racism and slavery. Nobody want to deal with it. Nobody want to deal with the Catholics, who are involved just as much. I was reading an article. Freedman's Journal was the first newspaper or newsletter that was put out by Africans during the time of slavery. And the reason that it was written was to rebut the statements that were being made by an influential Jewish rabbi who lived in Baltimore. That's why it was written. Nobody want to deal with these things. We want to blanket it by simply saying white people. But there are segments within that group that were responsible for this. And when we confront the truth of it, that is the only time that we can begin to see the underpinnings of the system weaken. But you can't do it if you play the game and placate people simply because you don't want a target on your back or you don't want to be called names. Doesn't matter. The truth is the truth. That's the reality of it. So the kids who will be marching on the 24th, to me, they represent what feminine energy has birthed. That's to me.
Feminine energy what?
Has birthed, has given birth to. Feminine energy has given birth to this. And the catalyst was a male. There were 3 adults and 14 children killed in the school. I'll leave it to Sheldon and Nick to do the commentary on that. But there were 14 children, and if it represents anything to me, 7 and 1 is a new beginning. So that's a new beginning for adults as well as children. But, or should I say, however, the new beginning is a fulfillment of the scripture when it says, and they shall be led by a child. Not necessarily talking about a baby, but he's talking about the innocence of it all. And the innocence is represented by those children who are coming out of that school. I think one of the commentators had it right when he said that the Congress, most people in Congress have heard or fired one of those AR-15, but they have not been on receiving end. And that's all the difference in the world. It's a difference in finding the targets being fired. So, one of the daddies said that I have buried my daughter, but I want you to know that they messed with the wrong children at the wrong time. I don't think he meant to have the same connotations with that I have. I think that he's talking about we have the means to deal with this and we will. But I see it from the spiritual thing that this is the energy that will turn this boat upside down. Not only that, will put a hole in it so you can't turn it upside, can't put it up right again. One of the kids said, they asked him, say, okay, after all of this, and you're going to be graduating this year, what has this done to you? Guess what he said? It has made me an activist. I will do this the rest of my life.
Oh boy.
You see what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So here we are in a place where so many things are happening until sometimes it's difficult to keep up with them. But all of them speak to the signs of the times. When we look at North Korea, this government had nothing to do with that. The people of color decided we need to talk. And then,
Without y'all.
without y'all, now we coming to some agreement. So now we need to deal with this idiot over here so he won't bother us no more. And there's no doubt in my mind that he will find a way to mess it up. But I think it's gone further than anyone expected to be. Because for the first time since the borders were drawn in North Korea, a Korean president ran on the basis of negotiating with North Korea. The rest of them are going to do it. But he won on those bases. And did what he said he was going to do. Signs of the times is what's out here. I mean, they're right before our eyes. And we don't really see what's going on. We meaning those who are supposed to have the eye to see. And that's the church, isn't it? So, anyway, are there any questions?
I have a question. It's kind of not part of the discussion, but it is. Speaking of signs of the times, the opioid epidemic, it's like a plague. Look how many people have died. This flu season, look how many people have died. That's also like a plague. It's like,
You shouldn't.
Either-
That's like a plague.
yeah, that too.
Why were opioids brought to this country? And spread in the community to destroy us.
Okay.
That's why they were brought. There was no epidemic. There was no crisis when it was destroying our
Yes.
communities, right?
Right.
What you meant for my bad, God meant for my good.
Yeah.
You can't keep a man in a hole unless you stay in the hole with him. Hold it down.
Right.
So the hole that you dug for me, you fallen into.
Yes.
This is what I read in an article that they have shown that opioids are not any more effective against pain than Tylenol and ibuprofen. It was a lie that came from the drug company, which says something. They don't care who gets caught up in this addiction as long as they make money.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care at all. Richardson, the article, I read that article, and I wondered, why is it that nobody's talking about it? That the alt-right is just killing people? And it had different instances, but no one is talking about it. Why is it that every shooter is mentally ill? He's not mentally ill, still shoots. Why is that so? Yes, it is a crisis, it's a plague. However, it's there for a reason. If the shooting had not taken place in Florida, we wouldn't be where we are when it comes to firearms. If the opioid epidemic was not in the white community, nobody would care about doing something about it. As long as the opioid crisis was not just the black community, but when it was in poor white communities, they didn't care. It's when it started hitting the upper income communities. That's when they cared. As long as it was killing folk in West Virginia, they didn't care. But when their kids started driving to West Virginia to get the opioid, that's when it began to make a difference. So all of these things take place. Why? Because the Pharaoh didn't let Moses leave until the plague came. And even as the plagues came, he still resisted.
That's kind of what I was thinking. As a sign of the time, these things have to kind of happen
Yes.
for things to change.
And back to Vermeil, at the onset, she was talking about how she felt about the 3 women who were killed in California. But that, if you did not experience emotional or empathy, then something is wrong with you. Yes, you feel it. But you also understand the necessity of it. When people go to war, people get killed, right? But that's the expectation, isn't it? Somebody go down. But it's supposedly, and I use this very loosely, supposedly for a greater good. Now, when we began to look at death, the real way we should look at it, the tragedy is in not being able to see that the treatment of humanity is the true cause of these events that's taking place. $8 million AR-15s in this country, in somebody's house. 8 million. Every time there was a shooting, gun sales increased.
Well, that's why they're not dealing with the shootings. Because the gun lobbyists and the gun companies need that.
Well, the difference now, I do believe that these kids are going to make a difference. I believe that. I do not think it's coincidental that the same day that they march we meet, and I didn't even think about that. We just chose that day because of Sheldon and his schedule. But that's not coincidental. Just like the idea of transitioning replaces the word of death, when we were talking about earlier. Just like the energy of that was infused into the macro and picked up by people, all over the country. That's the energy that we exude now, as well as when we come together, is going to do the same thing. It's going to have the same results, regardless of what happens in the physical. The last thing I want to say, unless there are questions or comments, is when I made the statement that Donald was not the source of the confusion that has always been there. He's just exposing it. Also keep in mind that Donald is not the first one to desire or to do or to put into action autocratic leadership.
And what is that?
Dictator.
Okay.
The only difference is the dictator, there were multiple dictators working together. Regardless of what happens in this nation, there's a handful of people who control it. Always have, always will. And in a dictatorship, no single person is a dictator all alone. They have people around them. And the nature of the government has always been that of subjugation, repression. Always. Always been that. And whether it be the Chinese on the West Coast or us on the East Coast, there's always been someone forced to build this nation, forced to do things that could not be done by the ones who were forcing it. That's the foundation. If everything were taken away that we built, there would be nothing left. The whole economic system of this world was built on slavery. It was built on slavery. If you look at economics in this nation separate from slavery, it doesn't exist. It just does not exist. If you look at the construction, of course, of the country. Without the slave, it doesn't exist. What I like to look at, or tell people to look at, is go back to the places that were inhabited by Europeans before slavery entered those areas and see what they had. Nothing.
The Romans enslaved people too.
Different than what Americans did.
I mean, that was part of their empire building, wasn't
Oh
it?
yeah, it was. That's what built the empire.
It's just perfected over here.
Yeah, that's
Evil
tongue in
perfected.
cheek. Perfect, yeah. The personification of evil. So, what do we do? Remember? Breathe. Everything that came into being was brought into being by the spoken word. And all that means is heaven and earth agree. Both worlds agree. And unless the two worlds agree, things will always remain the same. So that's simple. But it's time to change it. And I believe that's where we are now. I don't believe that we are on the precipice of change. I believe we're changing. I do believe that. I believe that with everything in me. If I did not believe it as deeply about it as I do, I quit.
Well, I'm having a brain block. Isn't this the 21st century, right? And 2 and 1 is, what you say, Rich? 2 and 1 is 3,
Yeah.
which is perfection, right? So,
Completion.
yeah, completion. Everything is evolving, still evolving, and it's got to do what it needs to do.
I tell you, I've said it before, multiple times, I said it again. The manifestation of this reality is going to be in November. You're going to see more females elected than ever before in the history of this country. And you're going to see females, some of those 54% females who voted because they were told to do it, they're not going to do it anymore. You're going to see that happen. It's going to be transitional. I told you that the African female frees to go for Asian female. Always have. And with that freedom comes a different outlook on life itself. And with that different outlook come new experiences. So here we are. In a place that the world has never seen. And at some point, I'm going to probably revisit 27 and 28 first chapter of Genesis, because the whole of what we were created to do is in the 28th verse. The 28th verse is full of what we brought into it. And when I say we are talking about Adam or humanity, okay, man will never leave the earth, by the way. There will always be physical beings in the earth. Always. Because whatever is brought into fruition by the Creator is always there. Because everything that exists is in the Creator's mind anyway.
My question is, in the next iteration of life, does it have to be on this terrestrial ball, or can it be somewhere else?
Well, it could just
Creator has created.
It can just as easily be on this terrestrial ball. Why? Because we constantly are moving through worlds. There are multiplicity of worlds that exist on this celestial ball. And we experience them. Most of the time we don't pay any attention. Now, do I think that there are other beings? Of course I do. I'm not so arrogant as to think that there are no other beings except us. I'm not that arrogant. Of course I do. Maybe they have more sense than we do. And do all the crazy stuff that happened. So, but no, I don't deny that there are other beings. And one of the reasons I say that, they're my go-to people, the Dogons. That's one of the reasons I say that. Because they talk about where they came from. Serious too. Yeah.
Well, everything comes from source.
Yeah. Well, we talk about animated beings that can say, hey, you're one of us, but you don't look like us, you green. Yeah. Okay. Are there any questions or statements? I certainly hope that there has been some sense of clarity. And I'm looking forward to our time together. We will not be here on the 24th. We will not be here on the 24th. Right?
Our teachers meeting in Union?
Yep, 2 weeks. We'll be on the 17th, but not the 24th. Okay. That's it. Telephone people. Thank you.
All right, have a nice day, everybody.
Thank you. Talk to you.
Too close together.
Denise, would you put dates on the, would you put dates on